Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a special of Fiqh Hour. You can tell that I'm a little bit out of touch, out of practice. Forgot to set up the Facebook live. Chalo. I guess if you're not watching it on YouTube, then you're not watching it at all. That's the simple answer, simple solution to all of that. So this is a special on Muharram. A few of my colleagues suggested that it would be a worthwhile a video to do because there's a lot of misconceptions around Muharram, a lot of confusion around Muharram. So please do put your questions onto the chat so that we can deal with them. Many people ask some peculiar things. Are we permitted to do this during Muharram? Are we allowed to do that during Muharram? Is it permissible to do this? Are we supposed to do this? Are we supposed to treat this month in a certain way? So there's a lot of misconceptions and queries and things of that nature. And during the time that I get where it's a little bit of a quiet period, people do say, Mufsab, whenever it comes to kind of topical issues where, people are asking a lot of questions. One was about voting. Obviously, I've missed the boat on that one. Then, please do come on and do a special Fiqh Hour just on that particular topic. So I said, look, you've got to remind me. I have such a schedule, such a timetable that, things do slip my mind. So if there's a particular topic that you want me to cover, or if there's a particular area which would be of interest for the public, then please feel free to mention it. So do put your questions there. I'm just going to give you a little bit like we did back in the day, if you remember, a little 20-minute, 15-minute blurb on Muharram generally, and then I will start tackling questions, inshallah. So first and foremost, we have a narration from the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Sayyidina Abu Huraira, in which the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that the most superior fasting after the month of Ramadan is the month of Allah, which you refer to as Muharram. So we already know that this month is a special month. This month has been given special value in that it is referred to as the month of Allah. And we will see later as well, is considered as one of the sacred months, the inviolable months, the Shahru Hurum, yani those months which war was made impermissible in, but also it carries religious virtue as well from that hadith alone. The Prophet ﷺ used to fast on the day of Ashura. Now, Ashura, for those of you who've studied a little bit of Arabic, will know that Ashara is in reference to 10. And this is in reference to the 10th of Muharram. So he would fast on this day. This narration comes in Sahih Muslim and also in Ibn Majah. In the last year that he was alive, before he passed, he said, if I'm alive next year, then I will also join the 9th with it. Okay. It so happened that the Prophet ﷺ passed in that year, and as a consequence, he wasn't able to join the 9th with it. There is a hadith that states that the angels who take the book of deeds to Allah and he sees good in the beginning, meaning in the beginning of the year, which is Muharram, and in the end of the year, which is Dhul Hijjah, he then says to the angels that I make you witness to the fact that I have forgiven my servant for the intervening period. Meaning that Muharram is the start of the new year. We're in now 1446. And Dhul Hijjah is the last month of the year. So we know like the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, we know that there is the virtuous act of performing Hajj. We also know that that month is a blessed month as well. So that is at the end of the year, and Muharram is at the beginning of the year. So those people who are performing virtuous acts in Dhul Hijjah and performing virtuous acts in Muharram, then as we see from this narration, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the angels that he will forgive everything in between those. And we see similar, for example, when the angels are changing duty. So we have the angels who descend at Asr time and swap with the angels who ascend. And then similarly, we have the angels who descend at Fajr time and then the others ascend. So because they see the people in the act of worship, i.e. praying Fajr Salah, and see the people in the act of worship, praying Asr Salah, then the intervening period is overlooked and forgiven. And similarly, we know that that person who performs Jummah Salah and he performs it whilst making great effort, wearing clean clothes, striving to get to the masjid early and listening to the lecture, praying the Salah, listening to the khutbah, praying the Salah, then that person is also waived of any sins and forgiven of any sins from the Jummah before. So we have this concept throughout the Islam where when a person is performing well at the beginning and performing well at the end, then even though he may have, problematic months and good months and bad months and good days and bad days, then those are overlooked because one is he started as strong as he possibly could, and secondly, he tried to finish as well as he could. Therefore, if one's deeds are good in Muharram and in Dhul Hijjah, then there is an opportunity for this person's sins to be forgiven, which he may have gathered throughout the year. So this gives us an incentive initiative. Now, obviously, there is nothing in Islam as such, where, have a good year, Happy New Year. We have this celebration that we tend to do, particularly those of us who follow the Gregorian calendar. January the 1st comes along, we have a habit, or at least on the 31st, a Happy New Year, Happy New Year. So in the same way, should we be sort of exchanging Happy New Years with one another? So there's nothing religious associated with the beginning of the new year. All it is a beginning. It's a beginning of a new time. It's a beginning of a new period. So one should make one should make intentions. One should look back over the year before and think that, okay, I had a good, like we do in Ramadan, or I had a good Ramadan, I had a bad Ramadan, I had an indifferent Ramadan, and assess how that year was. How did you perform? Did you achieve the goals that you set out to achieve? Did you, learn the hadith that you wanted to learn? Did you manage to recite the Quran, or the amount of Quran that you wanted to recite? Did you memorize those particular portions of the Quran that you wish to memorize? Did you manage to achieve what it is you wanted to achieve? Unfortunately, did you commit sins which you are now somewhat embarrassed about, which you now have remorse about, which you now feel apologetic about? How are you going to avoid them in the coming year? What situations led you to get into these problematic positions which cause you to commit those sins? How are you going to avoid those situations again? How are you going to avoid the steps which led to it? What are you going to do different this year? So absolutely, it is a broad kind of understanding, knowing that this is a new year, it's starting, and we wish to progress forward and do well in this year. Abdullah ibn Abbas was asked about the fasting of Ashura. We just mentioned that already, which is associated the 10th of Muharram. And he replied, I did not see the Messenger of Allah sallallahu seeking the merits of the days except for this day and this month, meaning Ramadan. Okay, so this was the practice of the Prophet ﷺ, where he wanted to fast on the Ashura and obviously with Ramadan. Now, what came first? Well, the fast of Ashura came first. So the Prophet ﷺ would fast on Ashura. He would encourage his companions to fast on Ashura. And when Ramadan became compulsory, then it was optional for those who wanted to fast in Ashura, and those who didn't want to. There was a choice there. It was not made binding. Okay. That last hadith I shared with you is available both in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Abu Huraira narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu passed by some Jews who were fasting on the day of Ashura, and he asked them, what is the reason for you fasting on this day? Because the Muslims and the Prophet sallallahu they would always seek goodness and try to succeed and be successful and be champions in goodness. So whenever he would see a people committing good acts, he would want to know what the rationale is for that good act. And if the rationale was a bad reason, then he would avoid it. But if the rationale was a good reason, then he would try to, to surpass those people in that. So whereas we do different, don't we? We look at the people with a nice car. We look at the people with a nice house. We look at the people with, the old shiny object syndrome. We look at people with a new phone, and we compete in that. So we think, oh, okay, they've got an iPhone, whatever. I want the next model up. Okay, she's got that particular car. I want the next model up. So we try to compete with one another when it comes to worldly things. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ, when he would compete, and I use that word compete with a small c, he would always try to outstrive other people as long as it was based on sound religious basis. Okay. So Abu Hurairah narrates that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ passed by some Jews who were fasting on the day of Ashura, and he asked, what is the reason for you fasting on this day? Because fasting is a religious act. There is no fasting of staying quiet, of not talking, but there is the fasting of imsak, refraining from eating and drinking. So they replied that this is the day on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and the children of Israel from drowning. As we know, the sea was split asunder. It allowed Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and his followers to cut across the seabed, walk on the seabed, cut across the sea when it looked as though everything was against them. They had the raging sea in front of them. They had Fir'aun galloping with his army behind them. It was literally being stuck between a rock and a hard place. But obviously Musa alayhi salam did not give up. He had belief in Allah, that Allah would come to his rescue and support him as he had believed in him, and exactly as he was hoping, was praying, what actually took place. Similarly, this is the day on which the ship of Nuh alayhi salam anchored on Mount Judi. Yani, this was another water incident. One was the Musa alayhi salam splitting the sea, and this was the great flood, which caused mass destruction and of peoples, and which meant that Nuh alayhi salam took on board his ark. The animals took on board this ark a group of people who were his believers, who believed in him, who believed in Allah, and they were saved. And this was the time when the sea, again, the water subsided, and the ark came to rest on Mount Judai. So Nuh alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam would keep a fast on this day in gratitude to Allah, to show shukr to Allah. So this shows that when a person does shukr to Allah, then they should do so by performing acts of worship. Okay, performing acts of worship. That's how you express your gratitude to Allah. People always wonder, how do I express my gratitude to Allah? I'm very thankful to Allah. Allah has given me a good life. Allah has given me good health. Allah has given me wealth. Allah has given me beauty. Allah has given me a good family. Allah has given me a good job. Allah has given me this. The list is endless. I want to express my gratitude to him. How do I express my gratitude to him? Simple. Worship him. Obey him. That's you expressing your gratitude to a Rabb. You can express your gratitude to a friend in a different way. You can thank them. You could treat them. You could give them a gift. That's your way of expressing your gratitude to a fellow human. But when you're expressing your gratitude to God, to Allah, then you are not on the same plane. You are not on the same level as Allah. Allah is your creator. He has no need for anything, whereas a friend may have need for something. So there's a huge difference. So we express our gratitude in a different way. We express our gratitude in realizing our situation, our position with regards to Allah. Abu Qatada narrates that a person asked the Messenger of Allah ﷺ regarding fasting on the day of Ashura. So he replied, I have this expectation from Allah that it will be atoned for the sins of the past year. So that's another great example of why one should strive to fast on the day of Ashura, because it is the day in which one's past sins are forgiven. Now, when we speak about past sins, when I spoke about, for example, the Jummah to the Jummah, and I spoke about the past sins being forgiven, when we talked about doing good deeds at the beginning of the year, Muharram, and doing good deeds at the end of the year, Dhul Hijjah, and hoping and expecting the sins in between to be forgiven by Allah, as we saw from that hadith, then this is in reference to the minor sins. This is not in reference to the major sins, because the major sins have other conditions attached to them that we must abide by in order for those to be forgiven. So Imam Shafi and Imam Ahmad are of the opinion that fasting should be observed on the 9th and 10th of Muharram, and Imam Abu Hanifa disliked regarding it as makruh to fast on the 10th alone. Okay, so it seems as though the argument is more for the 9th and the 10th, not the 10th alone, and not the 10th and the 11th. I know you will see in a lot of documentation and posters that will be flying around on social media where it will say fast the 9th or the 10th or the 10th or the 11th, as though they are held equally. I am of that position which I see that Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad was of, and from the narration that I explained to you earlier, in which the Prophet ﷺ said that if I am alive next year, then I will also join the 9th with it. Okay, he did not say I will join the 11th with it. So really, one should fast the 9th and the 10th. And if for whatever reason they miss the 9th, then they can fast the 10th or the 11th. Some people do ask the question, what if somebody was to fast the 10th alone? Now, the reason why it was considered disliked to fast the 10th alone is because the Jewish calendar, which was also a lunar calendar, and the Islamic calendar, which is also a lunar calendar, it meant that the 10th of Muharram would fall on the same day. And therefore, the people, those who were atheists, those who were mushrik, those who were Christians, would think, these are people of the same faith, and they will not be able to distinguish between Muslims and Jews. So in order to draw that distinction, that Muslims are the ones who fast a day before as well as the 10th, that's the reason for it. Now I believe, and I'm pretty sure, that the calendars are not the same. Therefore, if a person was to fast the 10th alone, then it would be valid. It's not as though someone has done wrong. So as we draw some conclusion to this, inshallah, then let me summarize what's been shared so far before we jump onto the questions. So in summary, the aim of this month is to set your stall out for the year, as we say. It's an opportunity, as we've seen, to have our past year's worth of sins forgiven. It's also, we see that it's an act of worship which was practiced by other Anbiya, Musa alayhi salam, Nuh alayhi salam. We've seen that. So it's a practice not just to the Prophet ﷺ, but also to the Anbiya that came before. This is not a year to have another festival, have another party, sharing Happy New Year, sharing cards and all the rest of it. This is an opportunity to draw close to Allah, and that's what its maqsad should be. Okay. So let's explore this whole thing about what was going on with regards to the fasting. I've given you a brief understanding about how the Prophet ﷺ wanted to practice something different to what the Jews had done, and that's why he had done so. One last point before we jump onto the Q&A. We know then that the 10th of Muharram is also historically associated with a very dark day as well in the history of the Muslims, and that was around the on the 61st Hijri. There was when Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, Ibn Ali, who was the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, was martyred in Karbala. Okay, and that also happened on the 10th of Muharram. Now, as Muslims, okay, and as much as there are certain groups that would want to say that they have no feelings towards Hussein radiallahu anhu, that they don't care, this is absolute nonsense, absolute poppycock. Why? Because of the fact that Hussein radiallahu anhu was the grandson of the Prophet alayhi salam. If somebody did not love Hussein radiallahu anhu, they did not love the Prophet alayhi salam, because the Prophet was quite clearly showed love and affection towards Hussein and Hassan radiallahu anhu for that matter, and Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu for that matter as well. We could carry on. So this is just some kind of nonsense that's brought in, unfortunately, in order to kind of pick holes and cause a situation. So we understand that this was a very, very significant event rather in the history of Islam, because we cannot underestimate the rank and status of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu. And remember, the key point to learn is what it is that Sayyidina Hussein stood for. Sayyidina Hussein stood for standing up against aggression, standing up against oppression, standing up against tyranny. What did he stand for? He stood for justice, he stood for fairness, and he stood for freedom. And these are values which, as we know, all right-minded communities stand for, and all right-minded communities would fall for. And this is exactly what Sayyidina Hussein, he stood up for, he gave his life for, which was to ensure that people their tyranny could not rule, and freedom for people to be able to follow their faith and also practice their faith, but accurately and fairly. Okay, but let's also bear this in mind, right? That Islam has never been a religion of individuals. We don't have any day in the year, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no Eid Milad, Eid Milad, yani Miladun Nabi. There's never been one. Why? There was only two Eids, Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha. You notice as well that Islam is named after a practice, a noun of submission. It's not named after a person. And that's why it's never been, if you look at the Hijri calendar that I just shared with you, new start of the new year, 1446. If you go back 1446 years, you don't reach the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. You don't reach any personal event in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. What you do reach is the start of Islam on a different footing. On what is that? The hijrah made from Mecca to Medina, when the first state was found and the first masjids were built, and Islam was first practiced openly and freely in that time period. And that's the date when Islam sets its Hijri calendar. So Islam has never been about individuals. It's always been about causes. It's always been about values. And it's always been about the deen of Islam. So one cannot get clouded and get emotionally affected by these sorts of things and start to cloud their judgment. Let's not forget, okay, that there were others, we had others, Hussein, Hassan, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abu Talib, also the Prophet ﷺ himself, and then if we're going to include other martyrs, well, Sayyidina Umar was a martyr, Sayyidina Uthman was a martyr, Sayyidina Hamza was a martyr. We could carry them on. And if we're going to, shall we say, sit in, wear dark clothes, and start to, become upset with ourselves and stop, being happy and stop living our lives as normal, then literally you could look across the whole calendar and you will find that there's a date on which a significant historical individual was affected. So I just wanted to share that with you. We're just going to jump onto some Q&A if we have some, inshallah. Okay, so they're not necessarily specific to Muharram, but we'll tackle them anyway. But let's tackle the Muharram questions first. So let's keep Suhaib there. So let me just pick up some Muharram questions. If you've got some Muharram questions, please do feel free to ask them. And then we'll jump on to the general questions, okay? So one question that we had, what is the significance of Muharram in Islam? Well, I've explained the significance of Muharram in Islam. What are the recommended practices and traditions during Muharram? I've explained those as well, which is the fasting of the 9th and the 10th. Are there any specific prayers or supplications recommended during Muharram? No, there are no specific prayers or supplications that I've come across that have been recommended during Muharram. Are you allowed to be happy, or should one feel remorse due to the historical events of what happened to Imam Hussein? Absolutely, one is living their life, okay? What we should be unhappy about is if we're not standing up for what Sayyidina Hussein and all good men have stood up for in the years that have gone by. That is an issue. That is something that we should be upset with ourselves about. But if we're standing and we're trying to make a change in the world, as little as it may be, as ineffective as it may be in our eyes, then that is something that we are doing. And remember, the opportunity you're getting to practice Islam, to spread Islam, to do good works is obviously a time of being content with ourselves. We get many times people ask the question, are you allowed to get married in Muharram? Of course one is allowed to get married in Muharram. It's not a ban on people becoming, being able to marry. We know, for example, there's ikhtilaf on this position with regards to the Aimma, but that the Prophet ﷺ performed nikah whilst he was in ihram. Now, ihram is in a highly spiritual state, but here the Prophet ﷺ is performing nikah. So Islam has always been practical. It's always been about dealing with the situation at hand and learning from history. Okay, learning from history. Then one could argue that one shouldn't be happy in Rabi al-Awwal because that's the month that has been associated with the passing of the Prophet ﷺ. But that's absolutely ridiculous. We move on, we realize that he has gone, but how do we maintain the Prophet ﷺ's presence in the world. We do that by practicing upon his sunnah. So we seem to be two-faced, aren't we? Or there's an element of duplicity in us, that on the one hand we're saying, oh, we miss the Prophet ﷺ, or how sad, he passed away, or whatever, and then on the other hand we're committing all these sins. There's this duplicity. So this is not really what Islam is wanting from us. Pakistani South Asian culture, they give out sweets in Mubarak. For what reason, I don't know, but usually on the 10th. Should we eat such food given? If it's specifically associated with the 10th, I do not understand why. Because obviously we've already explained that it is a day which normally people are encouraged to fast. So I'm not sure what the reason for that is. Is sinning in the sacred months considered worse than sinning outside the sacred months? So there is a difference of opinion on this, that, if a person was to sin in the months of the prohibited months, the ones I introduced earlier, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and the other one slips my mind now, in which these are considered as the prohibited months. So there's a difference of opinion amongst the ulama. Some say yes, that the sin is increased in value, and others say it isn't. So precautionary, one should be precautious anyway, than trying to getting involved in committing sins. What lessons away from the cultural aspect of Karbala should one take from Muharram? Well, it shows obviously the ultimate sacrifice that Sayyidina Hussein made, which was that he stood for the truth. We're not going to get into the kind of political side to it. Why was he going there? What was he doing? What was the backdrop? And all the rest of it. But they lived in the moment and they made decisions in that moment, and therefore these are the decisions they made. It is absolutely, we know the effect that has on Muslims generally, when we knew of obviously companions going to war against each other. When Sayyidina Uthman was martyred, that has a huge impact on Muslims. How it happened, why did it happen? It shouldn't have happened. Could he have been protected? Why wasn't he protected? And all the decisions and discussions around that. There's so many issues. And then obviously the Battle of the Siffin, the Battle of the Jamal, not the Battle of Siffin, the Battle of the Jamal that took place afterwards, and other battles which took place, which obviously many companions sought refuge from and decided not to engage. But there were decisions made by companions in order to solve certain matters, and that's how it was proceeded. We live in our time, and it's for us to deal with our situations which are in front of us. As Muharram is linked to Musa alayhi salam and his people, what lessons should we draw and implement in our lives from this month? The dua of Musa alayhi salam, where his people cried in fear, and Musa alayhi salam, certainly not, my Lord is with me, he will direct me. Yeah, absolutely. It is not a time to give up hope. I just explained when I was talking about the hadith in which the Jewish people explained to the Prophet ﷺ why they were fasting on this day. Obviously, let's not forget the basis of that. And the basis of that is that here is Musa alayhi salam taking the people he was told to take, is by direct instructions from Allah, and he reaches this point where he thinks, what's going to happen now? Or his people start to raise the doubt. What's going to happen now? We have a raging sea ahead of us. We have an army descending upon us. How are we going to survive? So one should also look at this and think that when it looks like the odds are against you, that's not necessarily time to give up, because that's the time usually when the miracle is going to happen. That's the time when the tide is going to turn, quite literally in this case. So therefore, we should entrust our affairs to Allah. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. We entrust our affairs to him. We rely upon him. We believe him. We trust him. And when you trust somebody, you have to, like when someone says, do you trust me? Trust me is an element of ghaib, isn't it? Because you don't know what this person is going to do. So this person says to you, I know you're going away for 6 months. I look after your house. And you have that split moment where you have to make a decision, where you hand your keys over to this person. And he says, don't you trust me? Because what he's saying to you is that, will I not look after your house for the 6 months that you're away? And in that short space of time, you have to make a decision. So what do you normally do? You weigh up the track history or the track record of this person. Has this person been reliable? Has this person delivered in the past? And then eventually you make a decision. Well, similarly, when you look at what Allah SWT has done for you, since the day you were born, then yes, unfortunately, the way we look at life sometimes can be half glass empty, is that there are many things he's done for you which gives you half glass full. So this is about entrusting your affairs with Allah. So that covers those questions there. There was a few other questions that came in. So we're now just going to move on to the more general questions. Assalamu alaikum, Mufti. I have recently moved to the UK in a place called Bridgewater. There are many Muslims here who are coming from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh to work, first generation. We have a very big problem here that we do not have ulama amongst us, and there is no tablighi jamaat here. We are just consuming whatever is written halal, and there is no HMC meat shops or HMC meat available. How can we ask ulama and tabligh to come here and guide us? Well, the simple thing is, my brother, is the first thing you need a place of worship. So you need either a masjid, and if a masjid is beyond your means, you need a musalla. So that's the first thing to do. So you need a place where Muslims can congregate, at least to pray the 5 daily prayers. In order to then congregate and pray the 5 daily prayers, you need to then employ an imam. So you need to employ an imam so that the imam comes in, and you ensure that you employ him and pay him well. His job will then be to lead the 5 daily prayers, and also what he can do is he can start a maktab class. Then he can start working with the community in the area. Now, obviously, it's not running a masjid alone is a huge task. So therefore, he would need to be supported by other staff members in the masjid as well. That will also help. So there might be somebody that's responsible for the IT. There might be somebody that's responsible for something else. So you get a team of 3-4 people, and then they can start working slowly in the community. To ask for a scholar to just drop everything and just turn up in Bridgewater, and then he's going to look around and think, okay, what do I do here? How is that even possible? What's going to happen? It's the community's responsibility. It's the community's responsibility to set up a masjid, set up a musalla, wherever is easier, and then recruit staff, and then they can be staffed. And once you've recruited staff, then the staff can work with the community to start challenging like for example, the halal food, start challenging other issues, inviting people to the masjid, inviting ulama to the masjid so that there can be lectures, so people can learn, start having classes in the masjid, either for tajweed, classes for women, classes for children, classes for men, so they can start learning the deen more. That would be the steps that I would advise you to do. One question on the ladies. Assalamu alaikum. A Muslim teacher is doing a fundraiser at her school for charity. One of the teachers has donated alcohol to win as a raffle prize. She was wondering if she can use alcohol as a prize or not. No, unfortunately not. She cannot use, well, not unfortunately not, but she cannot use the alcohol as a prize. She should give that back to the person, who I'm assuming is a non-Muslim, and say to that person that, thank you very much for the offer, but we cannot accept this as Muslims. Can you give something as an alternative? Okay, so that's those questions from there. Let's see what's on here. Assalamu alaikum. Can a husband ask for zakat money where his wife, who lives in the same home, may not be eligible for zakat? Can a husband ask for zakat money where his wife, who lives in the same house, may not be eligible for zakat? They live in Pakistan, and his monthly wage is £120, and his employers take £20 for life insurance. The wife doesn't work, but does have a lot of land she purchased with sadaqah money she received. The husband does not own gold or property and has no savings. All he receives £120 a month. Can people send him zakat money so he may build a house on his wife's plot of land? How are we supposed to feel about their deaths? How are we supposed to feel about their deaths? Oh, I see. Okay, so, well, zakat is not about he can build a house or not. If somebody is below nisab, then they may receive zakat. Okay, so if somebody is below nisab, then they may receive zakat. If the wife has mal, wealth, in excess of her day-to-day expenditure, like potentially this piece of land, which you could sell and generate lots of money. But remember, it is not the wife's responsibility to support her husband. So it is the husband's responsibility to support himself and also support his wife. So yes, a person may receive zakat if they are below nisab, but we do not decide or use this to build a house, use this to build a whatever. The maqsad should be, this person is below nisab, here is some zakat, and that's it. One can also not give so much zakat that this person becomes binding upon him to now give zakat himself. So therefore, it should be just within those means that he can do so. Hope that answers that question. I now understand what this means. How we're supposed to feel about their deaths. Obviously, it's a sadness, isn't it? It's like, for example, alhamdulillah, I'm a Sayyid, so it's a family member for me. So it's, for example, you remember a family member. So if you remember your father, or you remember your grandfather, or you remember your great-great-grandfather, then you may feel some sorrow, okay, because you've lost a grandfather, you've lost a great-grandfather. But this is the way of the world, in that people will die. People are born and people will die. This is how people come onto this earth, and this is how people leave the earth. The main thing to do is for one to make sure that the principles by what they stood for, the principles for what they fought for, the principles for what they eventually died for are those principles which are close to your heart. So you ensure that you're bringing that change to yourself, to your immediate family, to your extended family, to your local neighborhood, and beyond. Okay, alhamdulillah. So if there's any more questions, please do feel to fire away. I will give a couple of minutes, give me time to sip a bit of coffee, moisten the throat, and then inshallah we'll see where we go. Again, if we've got specifically Muharram questions, I'd appreciate that. If we don't, we don't. That's not a problem. If they've got some general questions, then please do ask the general questions as well. So it seems that we have reached that point where we are satisfied. Oh, there you go. I feel like Sunnis avoid thinking about them as most of the movement is taken over by Shia, so Sunnis may feel guilty. Yes, that's a good point, Suhaib, and that's why I try to address that. I think right at the outset is that we feel as though we have to disown those people. Absolutely not. Okay, absolutely not. Hassan radiallahu anhu, Hussein radiallahu anhu are the grandsons of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu is the fourth Khalif, and he is the cousin as well as the son-in-law of the Prophet alayhi. The Ahlul Bayt is part of us. Okay, and I don't, if we want to avoid this Sunni Shia divide, they're part of us. Okay, those who, we label ourselves as Sunni, they're part of us, or I'd rather use the word Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? They are part of us. And I think sometimes we do shy away. Absolutely, you're right, Swab. It's a valid point. Sometimes we do shy away because we don't want to be misidentified, possibly, or we don't want to be, called names, so to speak, whatever. But that's something that's on somebody else calling us that. For us, we need to understand that they are part of our heritage. They are our leaders. Okay, they are a part of the blessed family. Ahlul Bayt, and we have as much association and right to them than anyone else. In fact, even more so, because we are continuing to hold on to what they practice. It's like, for example, the Jewish people who try to own Musa alayhi salam. Okay, and therefore Muslims might feel a little bit uncomfortable to claim Musa alayhi salam. We have more right, like the Prophet alayhi salam said, to Musa alayhi salam than anybody. Why? Because we practice his faith. Similarly, like Ibrahim alayhi salam, we hear the phrase Abrahamic faiths. So we find that maybe the Christian community and the Jewish community lay claim to Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Why should we? If there's anybody that's following the practices of Ibrahim alayhi salam, it's the Muslims. You only need to look at Dhul Hijjah to see that with your own eyes. Okay. And then furthermore, when it looks to Isa alayhi salam, again, we sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable to claim Isa alayhi salam because we think, that's Jesus, Christianity, and all the rest of it. No, if anyone has the right to claim Isa alayhi salam, it's the Muslims, because it's the Muslims who practice the way of Isa alayhi salam. So going back to Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Hassan, Sayyidina Hussein, then if anybody has a right to claim them, then it is those people who are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Okay, so that's, I hope that's made that clear. Wa alaikum salam. If you have a question, ASA, then please do put your question forward. Otherwise, we'll be jumping off in the next couple of minutes. Alhamdulillah. Okay, I think that might be it. I said that last time, and then suddenly a question appeared. So let me tempt you by saying that again. If not, then inshallah, let me just leave you some parting words. Inshallah, obviously, I will try to keep Fiqh Hour going on a more. Yes, I will try to keep. Let's deal with that. Before you can go, can you tell us? Before you go, can you tell us the characteristics of hypocrites? Okay, hypocrites will lie. So okay, so if you have the characteristic of lying, if you have the characteristics of promising something and not delivering, if you have the characteristics of breaking your oath, if you have the characteristics that when you're losing an argument, you start to become aggressive, right, and become angry and become abusive, then these are characteristics of nifaq. Okay, these are characteristics of nifaq. So if one has these characteristics in them, then they have to be very, very careful because they have the characteristics of nifaq. You ain't going to have a label on your shirt or something which says, munafiq or something. It's concealed. It's within you. And, many people don't even know what that is. So it's absolutely essential that one is aware of that. How do we avoid these characteristics then? By committing less sins and performing more good deeds. It's really quite simple. It's really quite simple. Perform more good deeds with sincerity, without the need for show, without the need for riyah. Do it with sincerity, even if it's little, and keep steadfast on it and practice the deen. It's as simple as that. If the deen asks you to keep a beard, then keep a beard. If the deen asks you to practice hijab, then practice hijab. If the deen asks you to pray salah, then pray salah. If the deen asks you to fast, then fast. If the deen asks you not to steal, then don't steal. It's really quite simple. But if you aren't, if you're allowing yourself to do that, or if you're committing those acts, then know that what this does is black dots start to appear on your heart. And when those black dots overcome your heart, then it's problematic, isn't it? It's very problematic. I help people get apprenticeships by answering their questions in a group. The group has females, but every text is public to everyone. Is it allowed? Yeah, if you're answering the questions, and you may answer the questions, absolutely. On this group, we have women asking questions, men asking questions, and therefore I answer those questions. So yes, as long as you avoid privately talking to them, as long as you stick to what it is required for you to stick to, then absolutely, because that's the requirements of your job. You did not ask to be put into that situation. You did not ask for women to come and ask you questions. It's that you're on that particular group, and therefore they will ask questions on there. So absolutely keep it professional, keep the conversation absolutely relevant to the task, and that would be absolutely fine. See, every time I say, okay, last minute, and then I'm jumping off, then a question appears. So I've said that, I think, twice so far, and that was around 35 minutes, and we're out on 42 now. So inshallah, let's try that again. Barakallah feek. So Barakallah feek. So last call, and as I make my last call, I'll leave you some parting words unless another question arrives. And that is, obviously, I will try to keep the Fiqh Hour going. It won't be as regular because I'm scheduled to do quite a lot of work over the next sort of few months. But do please look out for them. And whenever there's a particular topical point, then please do join the Markaz al-Ifta wal-Qāḍī Q&A groups, and then at least you can raise that. And if I see a trend, then I can do a special. This came about due to a trend of people asking about Muharram. What can you do? The do's and don'ts of Muharram, and saying, okay, what is the reality behind it? Hence the reason for it. So that's how it works, inshallah. Please do share the other videos that we have so other people can benefit as well. And inshallah, I think I'm down in London on the 28th of July. So if you are on our channels, then you'll get a poster coming up soon, and we can appear on there. Can we do a series on death, like the process? I've just done something ASA or AA with al-Balagh. It's growing. It's growing, inshallah. I I used to regularly have long hair back in the day, okay, but long hair becomes so difficult to manage, as I'm sure you've experienced. So, but now I'm going to go through another phase of growing it, So it's starting, inshallah. I'm watering it and oiling it. So let's see how far it goes. So going back to the series on death. So I've just done recently now on a Sunday. I used to deliver for Al-Balagh. So they do have it, but that was a closed, not open to the public. It was only to whoever was a student. So, and I think it was paid for as well. So yeah, we can explore that, inshallah. We can explore the passage of death and how all that occurs. So that's a point I can make down, inshallah. But what I want to do is I need sort of commitment as well, so it makes it all worthwhile. If we can get a handful of people joining together, then inshallah what we can do is we can maybe put some time aside for that, inshallah. So I think that is that. So I pray that you have a blessed few days and weeks in Muharram, and that you use this month as a launch pad for the remainder of the year, and set out your stall, as I said, and practice your faith as you should do, and draw close to Allah. Please do share, as I said, the channels with others so people can benefit as well. There will be a document shared on the channels. So if you find the Olive Foundation channels, you find the Mufti Amjad Muhammad channel, it's on WhatsApp, then you'll be able to join it, and you'll see the document that will be shared in a day or 2 days time, inshallah, which will also be useful. Jazakumullah khair for attending, and share the video once it becomes live with others so people can become aware and avoid doing the wrong things in Muharram and do the correct things. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.